Thank you. Well, I echo everyone else's thanks for having the meeting, and to the good government groups that also encouraged us to get together, and apologize for my hoarseness. It's just something we're going to have to put up with. But I think the bottom line that we're facing right now is that Illinois, and importantly Chicago, are facing the biggest economic challenge that they ever have, ever. Now, it is true some good things have occurred, some in Chicago, some in the state, but in my mind, that's a little bit like saying that this knee looks good or this toenail is growing well, but the patient has a rampant systemic infection. And the question before us, and this is directly to your point, Mr. Speaker, is do we put the Band-Aid or two and take care of the symptoms, or do we treat the root cause? And I obviously have a different opinion than you, in that we also need to treat that root cause. Our state and our major city are sick. We have to do something about it. I believe that the budget quagmire is reflective of the poor economy in the state of Illinois, and it's getting worse. It's getting worse because we're not competitive with the other states around us. We're not competitive in workers' comp. We're not competitive with prevailing wage. Our lawsuit climate is not competitive. Our collective bargaining balance, if you will, is not competitive. Our regulatory environment and the overall tax burden, as Leader Durkin pointed out, is very high here, because you have to include sales tax and property tax when you're talking about the burdens that a family faces. In my mind, the consequences of us not being competitive are very, very high. We're losing jobs. We've lost 115,000 manufacturing jobs in the last 10 years. Illinois hasn't added one net job since 1999. We actually today have fewer jobs than we had 16 years ago. And meanwhile, jobs are going other places. It's not that the jobs are disappearing entirely. Since the recession, which is often blamed as the beginning of our problem, Illinois has recovered 16% of its jobs. On the other hand, Indiana, 70% recovered. Wisconsin, 78% recovered. Minnesota, 150,000 jobs in Indiana, 90,000 new manufacturing jobs. We're losing middle-class jobs while others are increasing those jobs. It's well documented by our flagship university, as well as other sources, that Illinois has the highest outmigration rate of any state. And that outmigration is working, tax-paying families and job creators. It's not just snowbirds. When those people leave, it puts greater strain and demand on the expense side of those important and expensive programs like Medicaid. Our middle class is hurt by the policies that drive jobs out of the state. I don't believe this is a union or non-union issue, a core belief or non-core belief issue. It's a middle class issue. We're talking about nurses and hairdressers, secretaries, middle managers who are suffering with the high cost of living here in Illinois. That's the middle class that is not being protected. They're leaving this state or being forced to rely on government assistance, which is expensive for those that are left. What do we need to do? We definitely need to find some common ground in order to make Illinois competitive. I frankly have been shocked at the refusal of some Democrats to engage in any discussion and real negotiation to get the state back on track, and that includes issues that you might determine to be non-budgetary. Despite the 12 years of Democratic control in Illinois and almost 70 in Chicago, some still see no need for real reform. And I say some because at least some rank and file Democrats and lawmakers have shown a willingness to compromise. We've had bipartisan working groups, both formal and informal. They have looked for and found some common ground. That might be a place to begin. Compromise to achieve structural change is an important thing to talk about. The stalemate that I feel that is being imposed upon us by refusing to discuss these non-budgetary items is hurting the state, and it's hurting Chicago and other communities by showing that Illinois is an unpredictable and unstable place to do business. The governor, and I believe the Republicans, have entered this process in good faith. We are ready to take hard votes. I give the governor particular credit in his signaling his willingness to negotiate. Early on, he took out one of the most perhaps explosive elements of his plan, and that is the empowerment zones or right-to-work zones, knowing full well that many manufacturers won't locate in a non-right-to-work state. But that is off the table. We're not even talking about that. But he also modified his local control proposals based on democratic feedback that came out of those working groups, agreed with President Cullerton's consideration model with respect to pensions, tried to meet Democrats halfway on work comp and lawsuit reform. We recently compromised on child care and on the Don scores. The governor helped negotiate the unemployment insurance agreement with business and labor and reached collective bargaining agreements with several unions, including trades, Teamsters, and SEIU. Now, it's my belief that we can get an agreement that's good for Illinois if you want to. I believe that most of the state is ready, with the exception of a few special interest groups. I think everyone wants agreement. The status quo in this state and in Chicago is unsustainable and it's unacceptable. The changes being suggested are reasonable. They are not extreme. They move Illinois in line with other states so that we can compete once again and become the powerhouse in the Midwest and the nation that we once were, and frankly, that we deserve to be. There's no doubt that some special interests, especially those with the financial stake in the status quo, won't like these changes, and that's on both sides. But over many years, legislative actions have put the special interest over the interests of the taxpayers and the job creators, and they've hobbled the state. It's time to rebalance those interests. That's what we're talking about doing. My caucus and I stand ready to help, and I know at least some in every caucus do as well. It's December, and I sincerely hope that we don't have to wait much longer. I too look forward to more meetings and real negotiations on some things, and nothing should be off the table.